Okay, I've got this glued together. This is Alienhead, and of course the gluing wasn't flawless. But now I'm going back into some of the areas where the seams have kind of shown up. And all I'm doing is taking my fingers and a little wood brush, sculpting brush here, and there's a sculpting tool, and using wood filler and just putting that over that to fill in those gaps. Then all you do is take a little brush, dip it in some water, and then just go back over it and smooth it out. And what that does is it fills it in and it takes off the excess. And it just makes it look smooth where it doesn't have a jagged line there. So when you go to paint these things, they're not going to be, they're not going to look, spliced together roughly, with a seam line that's prominent. And you just take it and dip it in some water and rub your brush back and forth and make kind of like a smooth area that covers that up. And then let it dry. Of course, you got this excess up under here, and you take that off and just put that on an area that needs to be filled. And just take a brush and brush it in, it smooths it out. And this is water soluble, so anything that's dried, you can just, take it and just take your brush and rub it over it, and it'll take it right off, smooths it in. Makes it flow really nicely. So that way you don't have any rough edges or anything like that that you need to, cover up, or you don't have to sand it down. Because this is PLA, so you really don't want to sand it down because you can rip some of the fiber, interwoven fiber in here. And if you rip the interwoven fibering, then you ruin pretty much the strength of the print from one side to the other, from where it interconnects. And all this will be covered up in paint, so, it won't really matter. You just take water and just kind of brush it and smooth it out. And dip your brush and just smooth that out. And just keep those seam lines from popping up and popping out. It fills in, it's a wood filler, so it fills in those gaps. So, and if you have to go back over it, and then just take a little bit more and just put it on there and just dab it on there and just fill it in and wait for it to dry out and then smooth it. And this is a good enough print that pretty much all the way around I haven't had to do much filling. But when I put it together and pressurized it, there were some gaps that had to be filled. So I thought, well, you know what, we're going to just take this wood filler and put it in here and, get the gaps that were in there filled up. It just basically smooths out the lines that are showing. Just makes it a little bit more smooth to look at and that type of thing. And color doesn't matter. I mean, it's going to all be painted anyway, so if you come up with brown on it, the original film version was a gray, black, brown color combo, so this will mesh in quite nicely. You don't want any big seam lines that are protrusive. You want it to be really smooth, so I'll take a little wood filler and put it in there and just lay it on there like that. Kind of go back and forth. on the part that you need to cover up and just cover it up. And see, I still have to put the pipe flange right here. So I have to drill a hole. Now this is very heavy, so I have to drill a hole to place a pipe or some setting there, not only just to display it, but to hang it, to paint it as well. So in doing that, I have to make sure that I have a good counterweight to the back end as well as the front, because it's even though that's about the main middle part of it, the weight distribution between the front and the back, these are not light pieces, these are heavy. So they are going to be, they are going to have some weight to them. I'm just taking a spatula and just going along here and just putting the wood filler in there to cover up those lines. And smooth it out best as I can like that, so it covers the lines are not protrusive, you don't see them, that type of thing. And then just go back in there with a brush and smooth it out, and you can't tell anything. It's like, a little bit like laying concrete, you want to smooth it out, but it's not concrete you're working with. Like I've got one down here that I've got to put on, it's dried out, and it's just, put it on there and just smooth it out, smooth it out, smooth it out. The painting part of this is going to be a challenge though, because I have to dry brush. I'm not going to airbrush. I've got to primer it. And the primer is also what's going to cover up a lot of this coloring. Once you smooth it out and everything and you get it looking good, the primer, which will be a gray base, is going to cover a lot of this. So I'll scrape as much of that off as possible, and then go back in and just kind of do a line filler right there just to smooth it out. And take a brush and just kind of go over that and just smooth it out. There's no lines, no nothing. I mean, you can see a ridge where it folds with the ribs, but you don't see a line like a crack. There's no cracks at all in this. That's all I'm doing, is just taking this and just filling in where there might be some protrusive areas that would be cracks. And just smooth it out with water. And that makes it less lumpy and all that. You can barely see it, I think, but right here on the top part, there's just a little line. And with some of this in a wet brush, you can just go in there and stipple. You don't even have to fill it like with a bunch. You just stipple it with wet primer in there, or wood filler. And you can cover up those lines. I'm going to do this just to do it and get a line running. And put it right there where that is going. That's not very prominent, but you know, you will see some, but not a lot. And that right there is not a mesh line, that is a print line right there. This top one here is a print line. You see the line more prominent right here. I'm just going to take the filler, and push it in there like that. Kind of come from the bottom and go up and just fill it in. And then come down the top and fill it in. Mush it on the sides. I'm not usually one to, you know, try to work priming and molding and filling the filling, priming, and painting a 3D printed piece, but Chris Russell, like I said in the other video, is a friend of mine that did this, and he makes these, so excuse me. I'm just doing this to kind of fill this in. Excuse me. I was having a little difficulty in the last video with gluing it because I was trying to use the super glue, and I I didn't have any weight distribution to put it on, and a couple of pieces will come off, and of course, you know, haha, that's funny, but finally you set something heavy on top, and depending on the weight distribution on the top is whether the back part is going to raise up. So if at all possible, when you do one of these, if you can make the weight distribution as even on as possible on each piece, because I was just trying to assemble the whole thing in one. And you can do it layer wise. You can do like one piece, but you know, that takes too long. And I know that this is for video purposes and intents, this is a good thing. You can do it either all at once, or you can do it layer by layer. Piece by piece, I'm sorry. Layer by layer. Yeah, you can do it piece by piece, and that is probably an easier way to do it than trying to do it all at once like I did. But it will work either way. It just depends on your level of patience and how much weight distribution you have for the pieces. I would probably, you know, in that experience, would probably have gone back and done, you know, if I would do another one of these, I would do it layer by layer or piece by piece, you know, as sections, like 1, 2, glue it, weigh it, glue it, weigh it, glue it, weigh it. That way there's no separation. But like I said, that video was made, the assembly video was made with the intent of showing the entire thing. And it turns out that the back piece that I had to cut and trim for the back of the head was not misaligned. That was my mistake. What I can do is, there is a gap in the back of the head, and having a look at the videos, there is a gap in the back of the head under the jaw, and anything that is bigger than what it's supposed to do, I can take, you know, wood filler and hot glue and just put it in there and fill it up. You know, it's going to require a little bit of sculpting and finesse, but, you know, if I can make it match the photo as close as I can, you know, that type of thing. So that will be a good thing to do. Just take a paintbrush and smooth that in there. Make sure all those gaps, little cracks get filled. And then just take some water and smooth it out. That takes all those lines out of there, and it makes it nice and smooth. That way you don't have to go back and sand it down. Because like I said, this being a PLA print, you don't want to put too much pressure and or friction on it, or you will fray the layers. And if you fray the layers, you will have, this thing will have weak points, and it will come apart on you. And it's very, very hard to put it back together once the layers have come undone. That's why when someone usually 3D prints something, they make a mold of it in resin, so they have, you know, you can go back in and take the line protrusion stuff out when you make it in a mold of it. But in saying that, whatever you print, it might want to be, and you intend to make a mold of it, make sure that it is a private file between you and the artist who created it with full express permissions, or B, something that you designed. It's not advisable to take something that somebody else did and mold it and sell it without permission, or you know, that type of thing, because they have people now that are putting copyrights on some of the design work, even though it's a 3D print. And not a lot of people think to, oh, I can make a mold of this and make copies of this. You want to make sure that you have full express permission from the original artist. And if it is something you designed and you make a mold of it, like I did a T-Rex in ZBrush some years ago when I first started doing this, and had somebody help me with how to do the skin textures and all that. And I was able to take a photograph of a T-Rex and design and mold and make the skin textures and that type of thing and print it. And I printed my own design, but that thing was about one of the only things that I designed myself and printed outside of a couple of character sculpts that I did, and I have yet to mold those up, but those are coming because they've been sitting around for years, a few years, a couple of years, just waiting for me to do something with them. So I have one character sculpt that I am working on that was designed in ZBrush, that was printed and is going to be molded and refined and all that. But that's later down the line. But I'm no longer pursuing 3D printing and that type of thing, because now it's like, everybody seems to have one. The machines are a lot better modeled now than they were back then. When the tabletop first started coming out about 3 or 4 years ago. And I went out and bought a couple of them and thought, ooh, I can do this, I'll make cosplay helmets and all that. And then everybody got doing the same thing. And I thought, well, I can't do anything to stand out in the crowd. And there was a lot of bird nesting and filament breakage and all that. And it just got too frustrating. Now they've refined all those problems and stuff, but it still is not worth the time and effort unless you can afford close to $1,000 for the ZBrush program and know how to work it and then design your own characters, copyright them, print them, mold them, and sell them. That's what a lot of people are doing now. So, that is taking on to be kind of a lucrative thing now, but I don't want to get into that because I think working with your hands is probably more beneficial than 3D printing. 3D printing does have its purposes, but it's not a factor for me personally that says, I'm going to make more money making these things and printing them out and making molds and doing all that stuff. That's not a factor. It's like I want to design something in my mind, sculpt it out by hand, mold it, cast it, paint it, whatever it is, and then sell it, whatever. So some things I do for myself for personal reasons. This particular one, a friend of mine did, Chris Russell, as mentioned in the video, and this is a personal project. This is something I've wanted that he's been doing and designing for a couple of years and working at. I just couldn't afford what he was asking for him back when he started, and he kind of made me a little deal that if I did one of these, for friends, friend discount, and I won't divulge what that is, but friend discount on it, and kind of show people how to do this. And if they got one, they would know exactly, they could follow me step by step on how to do this. So this is kind of a promo thing for him, and then I'm getting a piece that I can work on and do myself, for my personal collection. So now looking at this, all the places have been pretty much bondoed. Or not bondoed, I say bondoed, but wood puttied. So now you just go back in with the brush and a little bit of water and just smooth it out. That way you can get rid of all the lines and everything's just like smooth. No sanding required. Now you want to be careful that you don't over putty because you don't want to obscure any details on these things, but you also want to be careful to be sure to cover up any of the line cracks and protrusions without taking away from any of the detail of the sculpt or the print. I'll go around each area and just take water and just kind of push it around and make sure these things are come out smooth. There's a piece right here, this little protrusive that's going to be a little gap filler right there and right here, and I'm just going to put that in there and smear it around with my finger because I can push it in with my finger instead of trying to brush it in and be neat and polite and all that stuff. You can do a lot more with your fingers sometimes than you can with a spatula. Don't be afraid, this stuff is not toxic. So it's not going to hurt you. Just don't put it in your mouth. Might look like butterscotch, but trust me, it doesn't taste like it. Easy cleaning up with just water. And basically let it dry and soften it up a little bit when you can, where you can. And like I said, primer goes over this whole thing, so you have to use a good primer and cover it and coat it and all that stuff. That'll also help fill some of the gaps, but wood filler is best to use. And that's pretty much it. Just, you know, covering up and see right here. I've got some areas that are a little bit prominent. I'm just going to go back in there and just squish them right there. So I was trying to be nice and polite on that one, but there's no need to. Just push the filler in there and just fill it up. There, clean up. So pretty much that's it. Just go around with each layer, fill up any cracks and gaps, and it fills in all the little cracks and gaps and keeps them from showing. So when you go to primer it, you can run it over it to smooth it out. Like there was a big crack right here, and it's all smooth. It looks like part of the form, without having to be predominantly separation lines and whatnot. So there you go. It's easy to clean up with water. That's up there, and just got to make sure that you get your lines right here to where they're not so obtrusive. They don't look like lines that blend in with the thing. There you go. let that dry, and then go back in later and take water and water it down. Smooth it out. Spackle it. Get all the details back in there. All right, and that's pretty much it. It'll come out smooth. There's one right here that needs to be done. That's not quite as smooth as it should be. A little hairline, but cover that up and smooth it out. On water. For the most part, you can barely see anything, so, there you go. And that's it. Thank you very much.